Welcome to a Reddit Bytes production, the best Reddit channel on YouTube. If you subscribe right now, I will give you a cookie. If you don't, that's cool too. Enjoy the show. Today's Ask Reddit post. Men of Reddit who proposed and she said no. What happened afterwards with your life? Oh boy, this is gonna be a good one. Let's get started. She was an art major and I had just joined the army. We had been lovers since high school. I asked, she said no. She wanted to get her master's. We were friends for a while but we don't talk anymore. She works as a bartender I think now. I ended up getting married to my best friend. We've been married for more than a decade and have a 5-year-old son. We met in her home country of Germany while I was traveling. I knew I was in love. We dated long distance for a while. Me flying to Europe, her flying to the US. I suggested marriage so we could be together. She said no a few times. I didn't press, but I was patient and not being pushy. I knew she was worth the wait. Then it hit her that's how we could be together. If we got married, we could live in a country together. The difficulties of being born on a different patch of dirt. A few years later, I'm still married to my best friend and living with her in Germany. Not all no's stay no. Life goes on. My husband asked 3 times in the span of a couple months. We had dated for 3 years. He was ready. I wanted to graduate college first. Also, don't propose by handing your sew a ring while you're both in the car on the way to Burger King. I'm low maintenance, but put some thought into it. My dad proposed to a woman who said no. My dad was a violent alcoholic and she said she couldn't be with him unless he got clean. Took him a little while, but he did it. He wound up meeting my mom through a matchmaker and they've been married 25 years. If that woman never said no to him, he never would have gotten clean. It was the lowest points in his life, but it all brought him to my mom who makes him happier than ever. My dad talks to her sometimes. She got married to someone else and they had a son who died from a medical condition. We lived together for another 6 years until she changed her mind and told me that I should ask again. We were engaged for over a year and got married in 1991. We are still married, have 3 children, and are both still very much in love. As a woman who was engaged and the proposal was later revoked, it still stings a little 11 years later. When you're sure you're with the love of your life, losing them can really pop a hole in your life plans. She had cancer. I said we should get married because I had full medical coverage from my work. She said no, and over time we grew apart. Haven't talked to her in 15 years. Don't know if she died. This is the story of my parents. My dad asked my mom to marry him several times. She said no, several times. One day my dad asked my mom to marry him, yet again. She said yes. He freaked out and left her apartment and dumped her. 3 weeks later he hated his life without her and begged her to take him back and marry him. They were married 9 months later for 16 years until my mom passed from cancer. They loved each other so much and had such a deep appreciation for each other. That was 25 years ago. My dad has not remarried. No one will ever come close to my mama. Dated a woman for over 2 years and popped the question. First time she said I don't know. A couple months later I asked her again. She said maybe. I was pretty bent out of shape. But then I found out she was sleeping with several of my friends so I dodged a bullet there really. I asked her right out of high school, but she wasn't ready. We stayed together, went to college at the same school, spent the first year in separate dorms, then moved in together, got married a few years later. Our 20th is coming up. My mom told my dad no when he proposed to her even though they were already living together. She thought he was impotent and it wasn't until she got pregnant that she said yes. In retrospect, I wish my parents had decided early in their relationship that they can barely stand each other. I spoke to her about it beforehand, and she seemed really keen on the idea. So I decided to propose about a week after in front of all our friends. She was so shocked she picked me up off my knee and shooed me away. Most of our friends were confused, because everyone knew it was going to happen. And she said she was excited for it. I didn't know what to do. It was all really embarrassing and later she explained she didn't mean no, she just didn't know what to say and was scared. She said yes after apologizing profusely and just this year we celebrated our 9th anniversary. Edit. I'm happy that this comment blew up, but I feel like the next time I tell someone it as an icebreaker they're going to say I read this on Reddit. Not my story but someone I'm friends with. They both had TTY homes and became a couple at 14. Somewhere around 20 he proposed to her. She said she wasn't ready to commit yet. After that he'd propose to her every year partially in hopes she would be ready, but it was also kind of a ritual where he would show her that he's still serious. She would say no every time. In their late 20s he was done with his studies. She could see the finish line, so she told him she's ready, meaning marriage and eventually children. That's when he gets second thoughts about marrying the only woman he ever had a relationship with, and he wasn't sure if he was making a mistake. They went on a break. She went to the US from Europe to do her PhD at the MIT. They drifted apart more. She moved on and found a new long-term relationship with a partner that's a lot better for her, while he quickly regretted ending the relationship and started f-king whoever he could find on Tinder without being able to form a meaningful relationship after. My mother turned my father down, but didn't outright break up with him. She just wasn't sure about the marriage idea. She valued her independence and was nervous about commitment. No hard feelings, though. He called up the next day when she'd had more time to think about it, and she said yes after all. They celebrated 32 years of marriage last month. My mom and dad were not married and wanted a kid and had me. My dad, being Catholic and Hispanic, decided he wanted to be married to my mom and proposed. She said no because she hadn't been divorced from her first husband for very long and now had 3 young kids and preferred to stay not married. He threatened to leave her and got on his motorcycle and started to drive away until my mom chased him down and gave in, leading to what my parents call the voodoo wedding the same day. I never saw her again. Less than a year later I met my wife. We've been together 15 years. She said yes as I had a special occasion planned, one of those observation wheels, and I proposed at the very top, and we were on our way to a family event and I had a ring made and everything. Then a few days later she said no. Everything fell apart. I was distraught. We continued dating for a while, but it was long distance. Other side of the world. When I visited it would be super awkward. Eventually dad kicked me out, was flying standby and was stuck in an airport for 4 days. Took me years to recover. Now I am happily married and am glad it never worked out. I was not in a good place when I met her and her family were super controlling. It would never have worked. The woman I married is super cool and is my best friend. Turned out better than expected. We actually got married, moved in together. 2 weeks later, she moves out, blocks me everywhere and never gave me a reason. Shortly after I was served with papers. Now I'm divorced. That was last summer and not sure where I am now. Making work my main priority for now. I just want to know why for some closure, but that's too far gone now. She said yes on the second proposal and now we're divorced. Edit. Reddit is such a weird place. All the carefully thought out posts and comments get zero recognition, and then this random off the cuff remark is my most liked comment. Glad you all got a kick out of it. For those wondering, I've been single for a year. I spent last night with a smart, beautiful woman and had a blast. Life is good. She had said she wasn't really a fan of marriage, so I thought proposing non-marriage might be well received, and I wanted us to be together for the rest of our lives. So I asked her not to marry me. She said no. We have been married for 10 years. About 2 years later I met my wife of 22 years. We are happily married. The one who said no got married, for the first time, last year, and seems happy. My wife is way into me in ways that the former girlfriend never was, and I see my life as far happier with my wife than I ever was with the one who said no. She's not a bad person. I was just young and in love with someone who wasn't in love with me. It worked out for the best. I'm glad she said no. We were dating for a little over a year, but I was so sure she was the one. I drove 2 hours to see her at her college and went on a beautiful winter night walk and proposed. She looks me right in the eyes and said, "Oh, you thought this was serious?" Well, I don't know how to say this other than I have been saying other people. Well, actually I have been seeing other women. I was stunned. I got up, put the ring in my pocket and walked to my car, got in and drove away, never looking back, crying the whole time. Haven't seen or spoken with her in 7 years, even though she has tried countless times to reach out. Now it's a story I tell friends who are nervous about asking their significant others to marry them, reminding them that even if they say no, it could be worse. He didn't ask again, and I had to ask him instead. We married last year. I was proposed to several times by men when I was living in the Middle East. I think they just went and found the next American girl to propose to. My dad kept trying, and was eventually successful when he stopped using onion rings. I started reading this thread expecting to feel sad, but instead ended up feeling joyful after reading so many wholesome stories. Well, she said yes but no. Met her online and we really hit it off. She was just amazing. We only knew each other for a month before she moved in with me and it was just magical. Proposed just after a year together. She had a genetic disorder and it made her heart swollen. Familial dilated cardiomyopathy and it was pretty bad. You could see her heart pushing out in between her ribs. She didn't want to get married because then we wouldn't be able to afford her checkups and medication. She was constantly quite weak but still full of life. She took naps very often and one day she just didn't wake up. I cried for days and was heartbroken for a couple years. I still think of her quite often and visit her grave whenever I visit home since it is 1,000 miles away now. I know I filled the end of her life with happiness as she told me very often. Just feel guilty sometimes. It was really bad for a while. Then it was really bad. Then it became really bad. Then it became bad. Then it was just blah. Then it was neutral. Then things started to get better. They continued to get better by me learning to be happy and me doing me things. I eventually found someone else, and things have been getting better for 20 years now. My mum and dad had been dating for a few months when my mum proposed to my dad. He said no, not until he gets a proper job and can provide. A month later, he'd secured a job. They celebrated 32 years of marriage last month. I asked a woman after almost 6 years together. She said no, and added that maybe it was time for us to go our separate ways. Shock. But life has to go on. About a year later I met a different girl and we were engaged within a year. We were both ready for marriage. That was 16 years ago. We've got 3 terrific kids, 2 boys that are exceptional athletes and a girl who's a brainy little nerd. The lady who refused me eventually got married, had a couple kids, and got divorced, but she got married again, and had another kid, and got divorced again. We completely lost touch several years ago. We were living together. I asked. She said no. I love you but I need to think about it. I don't think I'm ready yet. Can you give me some time and ask later? A few months go by. I ask again. Same response. A few more months. Same deal. A couple more weeks and then she says, hey, what do you think of us getting married? I replied, that's an excellent idea. Why didn't I think of that? Our 39th anniversary is next month. Mine is a little different. Mine said that she wasn't ready yet and asked me to wait and be patient with her. It helped that knew she had some issues with commitment and change. So I played the long game and waited her to make a decision. It took 3 years and the birth of our daughter for her to come up to me one day and say that getting married was interesting to her. One more kid and 21 years later we are still happily married. Didn't even get to ask. She broke up with me a few weeks after I bought the ring. She told me that she fell out of love with me and that she just wasn't happy with me anymore. We had been fighting a little bit because we were all cooped up during quarantine but nothing too serious. I figured once everything started opening up and we could go do stuff that we'd both chill out. Well, instead my GF of 5 years decided to leave me. Then 1 week later she started dating another guy. She then told me she had feeling for that guy before we broke up, but that there was no overlap. I was devastated of course, returned the ring, and was very upset with her. She was my best friend for 15 years. I had known her since kindergarten. I was so mad and said some things that I regret and I ended up begging for her forgiveness. Even though I was upset with her for leaving me, I couldn't go on without her at least being my friend. So one day we talked and I apologized and wished her well and told her I just want her to be happy. I miss her like crazy, but it's her life and she deserves to be happy. All of this happened last month. All I know was that I was in kindergarten LMAO. My mother told my girlfriend not to marry me. For her sake we'd been married 48 years and retired now, doing well. Dim sum but especially chung fan. It's my favorite dim sum dish. It's just shrimp wrapped in rice noodle with a sweet dipping sauce. But oh my god is it delicious. Dim sum is generally pretty inexpensive and there's so many dumpling options to choose from. First major GF. She was stunning, modeled and I was besotted with her. Well, she started slipping away and I thought it'd be a great idea to propose to her and that way she'd be with me forever. Thankfully she was too smart for my desperation and turned me down flat, telling me up front that she was too young to settle down and wanted fun. Losing her was more traumatic than being turned down and I struggled with despair, but I channeled myself into my career, which took off. A few years later I found my true love and it was her that proposed to me. 26 years later we are still happy. As to my ex, I bore her no ill will and can only thank her for being smart enough to know that we were never destined to be together. LOL. I asked my wife. She knew it was coming. Got down on one knee. She said no. I blanched. She said just kidding, I swear it. We've been married 22 years last April. Every once in a while just for fun I bring it up, and she always apologizes. LOL. Depression and suicide attempt 10 times. We both really liked each other until I heard slot of text messages from a stranger saying, when do you want to meet up? Next day, I propose and she said no, I've already got someone else. She walked away and I've never been the same person. Well, between you and me, I grabbed a beer and watched Blazing Saddles. Not me, but my teacher proposed to another techer in the middle of all their colleges and she said no. On that day all his lessons were just silence and the techer just sitting in front of the class doing nothing. Everyone in the whole school knew it. Not quite what you asked, but my girlfriend at one time, 5 or 6 years ago, screamed at me during an argument, "I'll never marry you." To which I responded, "You don't hear me asking." We got married this past January. I'm someone who said no. I was dating a guy for 6 years, 4 of them long distance while we were at university, but we had both graduated and I'd come home to do a master's at a university close to my home city. He'd graduated in law, and here in Scotland you need to work for a year as a sort of trainee lawyer while sorting exams for a year after you get your degree to be an actual lawyer. It's kind of like passing the bar, I guess. So anyway, I found out he'd been cheating for at least a year with a girl we knew from high school and had been waiting for him to come clean when this happened, so I obviously told him no. He got his degree classified and he didn't do well enough to get a trainee post. I finished my master's but didn't particularly like it and changed careers more than once. Thanks financial crash. We're both married to other people now and don't cross paths at all, except one day I was in a pub restaurant with my husband and in-laws and the girl he was cheating with was our server. I was the person who said no. We got into a big fight and I went to the kitchen to clean and get my mind straight. He eventually came into the kitchen but then proposed. We were young but I was really surprised. Also, to anyone proposing, I recommend not doing that as a way to try and patch things up. Nabra. After about a year I proposed to a beautiful woman with a beautiful 4-year daughter. Her brother and I were firefighters together and he set me up. She quickly said yes. I then asked her daughter if I could be her stepdad and she said yes. I should have realized something was off when she wanted to wait and tell her family. We waited for 2 months and then she broke it off. Her brother knew about the proposal and couldn't figure it out either. Come to find out she was secretly seeing another guy. Her family and her daughter were upset with her. Saw the daughter about 6 years later with her uncle and she said that her mom made a big mistake leaving me. She wished I was her stepdad. I was in a relationship with her for 5 years, living together for 1. She had an infant daughter from a previous relationship with a drug addict who popped up occasionally. We moved together because her mother stole her rent money for months. I was feeling depressed and lost my job. I was diagnosed with clinical depression later when I sought help. I told her I wanted to move back to my parents' house as I was going mad. She said if I did, it would be all over between us. I moved and a week later, I tried to reach her and she had started a relationship with a biker she met while we were together. I went to her house and proposed. Got rejected. She had a hickey. It's been 5 years. She now has 2 more children. I started treatment for my depression. 3 more months to complete. Moved to another city and had a substantial boost on my salary. I'm feeling better than in the last 15 years. Yes, finally one of these that I can relate to. We met through family and I asked her to marry me. Made a romantic video and asked. She said she would think about it. Ignored me for 2 weeks and then said she thought about it and that she just didn't feel ready but wanted to be friends afterwards. Now here is the crazy part. For the longest part she was the one driving me crazy with marriage. SOOO happy we never got married. It was the 2nd grade and the girl's name was Christina and she was in my class. I asked her if she would marry me and she said no. I did the only reasonable thing. I told the teacher on her. Bro, you actually watched the whole video. I'd give you a high five if I was a human. Make sure to click the like button and subscribe for more great content. See you next time.